Daddy, are they coming soon? Lily's voice, small and hopeful, bounced off the marble floors of the Vance family mansion. It was a cavernous space, made to feel even bigger by the deafening silence. 24 pink balloons bobbed lazily in the air, silent witnesses to a party that had failed to start. Arthur Vance, CEO of a pharmaceutical empire that stretched the entire East Coast, glanced at his platinum watch. 3:00 p.m. The party was supposed to have started at 1. 2 hours. 2 hours of silence, of unopened presents, of a magnificent Princess Castle cake sitting untouched. A professional clown, hired for $1,000, scrolled through his phone in the corner, his painted smile looking more like a grimace of impatience. The truth was a bitter pill to swallow. Ever since the car accident 2 years ago, I see these. One that took his wife, Margaret, and left his daughter Lily a paraplegic. The invitations had started to dry up. The elite families of the pristine, gated community of Westfield had slowly, politely, created a chasm. Their excuses were always plausible. A scheduling conflict, a sudden trip, a terrible cold. But Arthur knew what it really was. The wheelchair made them uncomfortable. The reality of a 7-year-old girl who couldn't run and play like their children was a reminder of a fragility they preferred to ignore. "They're just stuck in traffic, sweetie," Arthur lied, his voice sounding hollow even to himself. He straightened the knot of his Italian silk tie, watching as Lily navigated her custom-built, glitter-pink wheelchair around the empty room. Every smooth rotation of the wheels was a gut-wrenching echo of the screeching tires from that rainy afternoon. Just then, the doorbell chimed. A jolt of adrenaline shot through Arthur. He practically sprinted to the massive oak doors, smoothing his hair and forcing the kind of charming, executive smile that closed multi-million-dollar deals. Finally, he thought. Someone came. But when he pulled the door open, his smile froze, and then evaporated. Standing on the immaculate porch was a little boy, maybe 8 years old. He wore a faded Superman t-shirt with a couple of small holes near the collar and a pair of jeans with a neatly sewn patch on one knee. His sneakers were scuffed and worn, a stark contrast to the polished marble he stood upon. "Hi, mister," the boy said, his voice bright and his eyes sparkling with an infectious energy. "I heard there was a party happening. My name's Leo. I live over in the apartments down the road." He pointed a thumb over his shoulder towards the public housing complex that was just barely visible past the mansion's ornate iron gates. Arthur was, for a moment, completely speechless. Of all the wealthy, pedigreed children in Westfield who had received an embossed invitation, the only person to show up was a poor kid from the neighborhood they all pretended didn't exist. "I don't have an invite," Leo admitted, his honesty disarming. "But I promise I'm really good at parties. I saw the balloons from my window and, well, I figured maybe the birthday kid might be lonely." Before Arthur could formulate a response, Lily had wheeled herself into the grand foyer. "Daddy? Who is it?" Leo's face broke into a wide, gap-toothed grin. "Hey, you must be the birthday girl. Happy birthday! I didn't bring a present, but I can sing Happy Birthday super, super loud." And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lily laughed. It wasn't a small, polite chuckle. It was a full, genuine laugh that echoed through the empty hall and filled it with life. "You really want to come to my party?" she asked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "Are you kidding? Birthday parties are the best." Arthur watched them, a storm of emotions churning inside him. In less than a minute, this complete stranger, this little boy in a worn-out t-shirt, had done what an army of therapists and a fortune in extravagant gifts couldn't. He'd made his daughter genuinely smile. But there was something else in Leo's eyes, a flicker of understanding, a quiet maturity that seemed out of place in a boy so young. It was as if he knew what loneliness felt like, as if he'd faced his own brand of rejection and come out the other side with his smile intact. If this story is already pulling at your heartstrings, make sure you're subscribed, because this simple act of kindness is about to blow the lid off the darkest secrets of an entire town, and prove that sometimes the most powerful justice comes from the most unexpected of places. "Come on in, Leo," Arthur said, swinging the heavy door wide open. "Lily could really use a friend today." The afternoon that followed was nothing short of a miracle. Leo didn't just attend the party, he was the party. He treated Lily's wheelchair not as an obstacle, but as a superpowered chariot. They raced through the gardens, Lily shrieking with laughter as Leo provided engine noises. He invented games where she was the queen of a magical kingdom, and he was her loyal knight. He marveled at the decorations, his eyes wide with genuine awe. "Whoa! That cake is bigger than my TV!" he exclaimed. "My grandma makes us cake from a box, but this is like something from a movie." Lily giggled so hard she nearly spit out her soda. "You're the funniest person I've ever met, Leo." Watching from the bay window, Arthur felt a strange cocktail of gratitude, shame, and a burgeoning anger. How could this child, who had nothing, possess more empathy and grace than the entire so-called high society of Westfield combined? That's when his phone buzzed. The caller ID read, "Eleanor Sterling, the unofficial queen bee of Westfield society, mother to one of Lily's former best friends, and the president of the board at the town's most exclusive private school." "Arthur, darling." Her voice was as smooth and cold as ice. "I'm calling about a delicate situation." "What is it, Eleanor?" "Well, several mothers have contacted me. They're concerned. There appears to be a different sort of child playing on your property. Someone who clearly isn't part of our circle." Arthur's knuckles went white as he gripped his phone. "Are you talking about Leo, the only child who had the decency to show up for my daughter's birthday?" "Arthur, you have to see our perspective," she said, her tone condescendingly patient. "We are families of a certain standing. We have standards. We simply cannot have our children mingling with unsuitable influences, especially given Lily's fragile condition." The cruelty of her words was like a physical blow. Unsuitable influences. "Eleanor, you're talking about an 8-year-old boy. A boy from those apartments, Arthur. We all know the kind of people who live there. Crime, drugs, a complete lack of family values. Is that what you want exposing your daughter to?" Through the window, Arthur saw Leo gently adjusting a blanket over Lily's legs as they sat under a tree, sharing a cupcake. The image was so full of innocent joy, it was a brutal contrast to the poison being whispered into his ear. "You know what, Eleanor?" Arthur's voice was dangerously quiet. "In the last 2 hours, Leo has shown more character and decency than you and your circle have shown in the last 2 years. "Don't be a fool, Arthur," she hissed. "People like that always have an angle. He's probably already figuring out how to take advantage of you." He hung up, his hand trembling with rage. For the first time in years, his daughter was happy. Truly happy. And for that, he was being punished. As the sun began to set, Leo prepared to leave. Lily grabbed his hand. "Leo, will you come back tomorrow?" she asked, her voice small. "If your dad says it's okay, I'll be back every day," he promised, with that same bright smile. "But what if people say mean things about you?" Leo's expression turned serious for a moment, that surprising maturity returning to his eyes. Lily, my grandma always says that people who judge you by what you look like can't see what's in your heart. And people with good hearts don't worry about what the mean people think. Arthur felt a lump form in his throat. This little boy possessed more wisdom about human dignity than any of the CEOs on his board. He knelt down to Leo's level. "Leo," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are welcome in this house any time. Always." "Thanks, Mr. Vance. And don't you worry about what those people say. My family's been through way worse than mean words. We always land on our feet." There was a strength in the way he said it, a quiet resilience that made Arthur realize this was no ordinary family. This was a family forged in adversity, with a dignity that poverty and prejudice could not break. As he watched the small boy in the Superman shirt walk down the long driveway and back toward the world they all tried to ignore, Arthur had a sinking feeling. This wasn't just about a birthday party anymore. This innocent friendship was about to uncover a rot in Westfield that ran deeper than he could ever have imagined. And the real lesson was only just beginning. In the days that followed Lily's party, the unspoken rules of Westfield society became painfully clear. Eleanor Sterling wasn't just a snob, she was a general, and she had just declared war. The attacks were silent, sophisticated, and they came from every direction at once. The first volley was fired on Monday morning, aimed directly at Lily. The phone rang, and the caller ID showed Westfield Preparatory Academy. "Mr. Vance," the crisp, formal voice of Headmistress Cartwright began, "we need to discuss Lily. We've had some feedback from other parents, concerns about the nature of her new friendships and their potential impact on the school's environment." Arthur gripped the phone, his jaw tightening. "Are you talking about her friend, Leo? Our school prides itself on maintaining a certain standard of decorum, Mr. Vance," the headmistress replied, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Families entrust us with their children's social development. Perhaps it would be prudent for Lily to associate with children from similar backgrounds." Arthur slammed the phone down, his mind reeling. They were using the school to enforce their prejudice. But that was just the opening salvo. On Tuesday, the real financial pressure began. 2 major long-term contracts for his pharmaceutical company were abruptly canceled. The official reasons were corporate jargon, strategic realignment, shifting market priorities. But Arthur had been in this game too long. He knew a coordinated squeeze when he saw one. These were clients he'd played golf with for over a decade. Speaking of golf, on Wednesday, he received a delicately worded letter from the Westfield Heights Country Club, the exclusive enclave, where deals were sealed over scotch and cigars. It mentioned a review of membership bylaws and gently suggested he might want to reassess his social commitments before his renewal came up. He was being systematically erased from the world he had once commanded. The cruelest blow, however, landed on Thursday. It wasn't aimed at his business or his social standing. It was aimed directly at his daughter's heart. Lily came home from school unusually quiet, her eyes red and puffy. She wheeled herself into his home office and just sat there, her head bowed. "Daddy," she finally whispered, her voice cracking. "The other girls, they said I can't be in their group for the class project anymore." Arthur felt a cold dread creep up his spine. "Why not, sweetheart?" They said, I'm friends with a poor kid." The words stumbled out, heavy with a shame that no 7-year-old should ever have to carry. "And they said, if I don't stop being friends with Leo, no one at school will ever talk to me again." That was it. Something inside Arthur Vance snapped. This wasn't about social climbing or petty gossip anymore. They were weaponizing their privilege to bully a 7-year-old girl in a wheelchair. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. On Friday morning, Arthur didn't drive his Mercedes to his gleaming corporate headquarters. Instead, he got into his much more discreet SUV and drove to the other side of town, to the public housing complex where Leo lived. He needed to meet the family that had unknowingly ignited a war. The Jackson family's apartment was small, but it was spotless. The air smelled of cinnamon and cleaning solution, and family photos adorned every available surface. Leo's grandmother, a woman named Rose with kind eyes and a spine of steel, greeted him at the door. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Leo told me what's been happening, the trouble our friendship is causing your family. Maybe it's best he doesn't come over for a while." "Absolutely not," Arthur said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm not here to end their friendship. I'm here to understand something. Mrs. Jackson, how do you do it? How do you live with so much dignity when the world judges you for things that don't matter?" A wise, sad smile touched her lips. "Mr. Vance, my husband and I moved here 30 years ago with 2 suitcases and a dream. Leo was born an American citizen, but we knew he'd have to learn early that the world wouldn't always see the goodness in his heart. We taught him that when people show you their true colors, you believe them. And when they try to make you feel small, you just stand up a little bit taller because your worth is yours. No one can give it to you, and no one can take it away." Just then, the door opened, and Leo's father, David Jackson, walked in. He was wearing a dusty construction uniform, his hands calloused and stained with paint. He was clearly exhausted from a long day of physical labor, but he stood tall, his handshake firm, his eyes meeting Arthur's without a hint of shame or intimidation. "Mr. Vance," he said, "I want to be clear. My family, we don't want a handout. We work for everything we have. We've taught our son the same." "David," Arthur said, looking the man directly in the eye, "that's exactly why I'm here. I want to offer you something. My company is launching a new division for community and social responsibility. We need a director, someone who actually understands the community, someone with integrity." David was taken aback. "Sir, I appreciate that, but I'm a construction worker. I never went to college. You have something more valuable than any degree. David, you have character. You know this community, its needs, its strengths, and you've raised a son who has more compassion than any Ivy League graduate I know. The salary would be triple what you're making now." Grandma Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, why would you do this for us?" "Because," Arthur said, a wave of clarity washing over him, "you've reminded me of the man I was before I got lost in a world that confuses a person's net worth with their actual worth." But that wasn't the only reason. Arthur had left out a crucial piece of information. All week, while he was being attacked, he hadn't just been taking the hits. He had been quietly making calls of his own. As the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company, he had access to resources Eleanor Sterling couldn't even fathom. His personal lawyer and old friend, James, had been discreetly digging into the real reason behind this coordinated campaign. What he'd found was so much worse than petty social prejudice. The call had come late last night. "Arthur, James's voice was grim. "You need to see this. This isn't about your daughter's playdate. Eleanor Sterling and half a dozen other prominent families in Westfield, they're into something dirty, something big. What are you talking about?" "Systematic housing discrimination. manipulation of city zoning laws. And here's the kicker: a secret, illegal scheme to acquire the land your friend Leo's apartment complex is on for pennies on the dollar. They've been pressuring the residents, trying to force them out so they can tear it all down. Arthur felt the blood run cold in his veins. They want to kick them out of their homes? Worse, they want to bulldoze the entire complex and build a luxury condominium development, the Westfield Gardens. The preliminary proposal has already been fast-tracked through the City Council, signed off by every single person who has been targeting you this week. Sitting there, in the Jacksons' humble living room, it all clicked into place. This was never about Leo and Lily. It was about greed. It was about power. Leo's friendship with Lily was a threat because it humanized the very people they were trying to erase. "David," Arthur said, his voice now calm and filled with a cold resolve, "will you accept the position at my company?" "Yes, sir. It would be an honor." "Good," Arthur said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Because your first official project is going to be a very, very special one. We're going to show these people what happens when they make the fatal mistake of underestimating the power of a united community and the consequences of messing with the wrong family." What Eleanor Sterling and her allies didn't know was that while they were busy playing their petty games of social exclusion, they had awakened a sleeping giant. Every threat, every canceled contract, every cruel word was now evidence in a war. They didn't even know they were fighting. The predators were about to become the prey. The Westfield City Council meeting that Monday night was supposed to be a coronation. For months, Eleanor Sterling and her allies had greased palms and pulled strings, ensuring the vote to demolish the public housing complex for their luxury. Westfield Gardens project was nothing more than a rubber stamp. She sat in the front row, regal in a Chanel suit, exchanging confident smiles with the developer, Charles Morrison, who was already counting his millions. This was the endgame, the final move to cleanse their perfect town of its unsuitable influences. "Item 15 on the agenda," droned the mayor, a man deep in their pocket. "Final approval for the Westfield Gardens redevelopment project." Just as he was about to call for a vote, the heavy doors at the back of the auditorium swung open. In walked Arthur Vance. But he wasn't alone. Flanking him were his lawyer, James, and a proud-looking David Jackson in a sharp new suit. Behind them were three people who made Eleanor's blood run cold: two of the state's most tenacious investigative journalists and a senior agent from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The smug smile on Eleanor's face faltered. This was a desperate, last-minute stunt. Nothing more. "Mr. Vance," the mayor said, visibly flustered, "public comment is over." "Actually," Arthur's voice cut through the room, calm and clear as a bell, "I believe I have some information directly pertinent to this project that the council may have overlooked." His lawyer, James, stepped up to the podium and placed a thick binder on it. "Members of the council, my name is James Knight. I represent Mr. Vance, and I also represent the 68 families of the apartment complex you are about to displace through illegal and predatory means." A nervous murmur rippled through the room. "That's an outrageous accusation," Eleanor snapped from her seat. "Every resident was given a fair legal notice." James offered a thin, icy smile. "Ms. Sterling, you might want to hold that thought." He clicked a button, and a projector screen behind the council flickered to life. It wasn't an image that appeared, but an audio file. And then Eleanor's own voice, cold and calculating, filled the auditorium. "We need to make their lives so miserable they'll have no choice but to take our lowball offer. Cut their maintenance services. Start fining them for every little thing. I don't care what it takes, just get them out. Eleanor shot to her feet, her face a mask of fury. "That's an illegal recording. You can't use that." "Actually, we can," said the federal agent, stepping forward. "Ms. Sterling, you and your associates have been the subject of a federal investigation into violations of the Fair Housing Act for the last 3 months. That recording was obtained with a court-authorized warrant." The second slide appeared, a series of emails between Eleanor, the developer Morrison, and several city council members, discussing how to expedite the removal of the undesirables and maintain the demographic integrity of Westfield. Morrison began to slide down in his chair, but he found his exit was blocked by 2 stern-faced agents. The third reveal was a forensic accountant's report, detailing falsified property appraisals and a clear documented scheme to defraud the families of millions of dollars. The room was in stunned silence. Finally, Arthur Vance stood up. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of moral conviction. "For weeks," he began, "I have watched the so-called elite of this town, people who believe they are the arbiters of class and decency, wage a cruel campaign against my family. Why? Because my disabled daughter dared to befriend a kind-hearted boy whose skin is a different color and whose family has less money. You used your influence to try and ruin my business. You used your power to isolate a child at school. You did everything you could to socially execute us." He pointed a steady finger directly at Eleanor, who was now trembling. "But your arrogance, your blinding prejudice, made you sloppy. While you were busy attacking a little girl for choosing kindness, I was busy documenting every single crime you were committing to fuel your greed." The final slide was the most damning of all. Transcripts of phone calls where Eleanor and others used explicit racial slurs and openly discussed their plan to purify Westfield. They hadn't just committed fraud, they had documented their bigotry. Eleanor made one last, desperate attempt. "Arthur, you're tearing this community apart over some hurt feelings." It was then that David Jackson rose to his feet. His dignity was a stark contrast to her panicked desperation. "Ma'am," he said, his voice ringing with strength, "my family came to this country looking for nothing more than a chance to work hard and live in peace. We never asked for a thing from you. You started this war because you can't stand the idea that a person's worth isn't measured by the size of their house or the color of their skin." His voice grew stronger. "You are about to learn a lesson my grandmother taught me long ago. There are consequences for underestimating decent, hard-working people." The mayor, realizing he was about to be dragged down with them, frantically tried to adjourn the meeting. But it was too late. The federal agents were already moving through the aisles, serving warrants and making arrests. Patricia Vanderbilt Sterling, the woman who ruled Westfield with an iron fist, was led out of the auditorium. In handcuffs, the flashbulbs of the journalists' cameras went off like lightning, capturing every moment of her spectacular public fall from grace. 6 months later, Westfield was a different town. Arthur Vance stood in his office, looking not at financial reports, but at a drawing Lily had made. In it, she and Leo were planting a garden. "Dad, look!" Lily exclaimed, rolling in with an energy he hadn't seen in years. She held up her tablet, showing him a picture. Leo's project on community health initiatives just won the state science fair. He's going to nationals. Leo was now attending Westfield Prep on a full scholarship funded by Vance Pharmaceuticals. He wasn't just attending, he was thriving, a star student beloved for his brilliance and his kindness. Lily, free from her toxic fair-weather friends, was surrounded by a new group of kids who loved her for her sharp wit, not her family's name. The phone rang. It was David Jackson, calling from the brand-new Westfield Community Health Clinic, built on the very land Eleanor had tried to steal. "Arthur, the numbers are incredible," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've provided free checkups to over 1,000 kids this quarter. Grandma Rose is here, teaching a nutrition class. She says to tell you that you didn't just give us an opportunity. You gave our whole community hope." Arthur's company had been transformed. He'd implemented a revolutionary new model. For every high-profit drug sold, the company would donate a full course of treatment to their low-income clinics. Profits, shockingly to his old-school board, had skyrocketed. Doing good, it turned out, was great for business. Meanwhile, Eleanor Sterling was living in a cramped, rented apartment, buried under a mountain of legal fees and civil suits. She had lost everything: her mansion, her money, her status, her own. Children had cut off contact, ashamed of the public disgrace. The developer, Charles Morrison, was serving an 8-year sentence in federal prison. One afternoon, a year to the day after the disastrous birthday party, Arthur was in the garden with Lily and Leo when he got an unexpected call. "Mr. Vance, it's Eleanor Sterling." He hesitated, then answered. I want to apologize," she said, her voice small and broken, "for everything I did, everything I thought. I lost it all, and I deserved to. But I finally understand how wrong I was." "Eleanor," Arthur said gently, "I appreciate the call, but the apology isn't owed to me. It's owed to the families you tried to destroy." "I know," she whispered. "I've written to them, to David, to Rose, to little Leo. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know. Your family taught me a lesson I was too arrogant to learn my whole life." "What lesson is that?" "That real wealth," she said, her voice cracking, "has nothing to do with money." After he hung up, Arthur watched Lily and Leo laughing together. They had taught him the same lesson. Justice had come to Westfield, not as a wrecking ball of revenge, but as a garden. By planting a single seed of kindness in the face of hatred, they had transformed an entire community, proving that the best way to defeat prejudice is to build a world so full of compassion and respect that prejudice simply has no place left to grow. The heart of this story reminds us that true worth shines from within. Like the Vietnamese saying, "Vang that kong so lua," real gold fears no fire. It's about finding the courage to stand against prejudice, to value genuine connection over superficial status, and to recognize the profound impact of simple kindness. We all have the power to challenge injustice by choosing empathy and breaking the silence that allows negativity to thrive. What resonated most with you? Share your thoughts below, like this video if it moved you, and subscribe for more stories that encourage reflection. May you find peace and hope in every day.